The pair of cadets barely were able to bring their hands up before the woman waved them off. I'm a civilian. I don't get saluted. I happen to work for a living. Milk snorted. I take it that joke is universal. That officers don't work a day in their life and get paid to sit around twiddling what's between their legs? Investigator Rob Larder of the Imperial Tithe Assessment Department asked. From what I can tell, yes, which is an interesting thing for some xenohistorian to think about. She then sat down across from the pair. Might want to get unbuckled, we're not going anywhere for a bit. Like I said earlier, you two are part of an investigation into the Orlon dynasty's flagrant abuses of power and corruption. There was a pause as she looked between the two. Milk swallowed and Cookie looked anywhere but the tall lady. Rob Larder sighed. That is where you were supposed to pipe up with more corrupt than normal joke. We would have laughed and this tension would have been broken, but that doesn't matter. She pulls out a file from a satchel hanging from her side. An actual paper file in a manila folder. Gunship down. 773 riots. The disappearance of a high-ranking Interior member vacationing on Earth. Brawling with fellow cadets. Disturbing the Empress's peace. Incident report after incident report after incident report. And they all have the pair of your names on them. The tax lady raised her hands in a placating gesture, as the pilot stiffened and Milk's hand moved to her harness. Relax. Like I said, you aren't in trouble. You see, there's another name on more or less all of those reports. Orlon. Cookie spoke up at that. While I am infinitely grateful for you protecting us, why go after her? She doesn't seem like the kind to skip on taxes. Rob Larder smiled a knife-like grin. You know, I read up about you humans and your taxes, mostly out of idle curiosity, during an especially long ship ride. I believe the best way to get you to understand is... Capone? There was another pause before Milk started laughing. You're going to have to break that down. How does that relate to taxes anyway? They got it because of untaxed income. Why would you need us to do that? Because we're not going after our income, even though that is a bit suspect, Rob Larder replied. As of Imperial Tax Code 164398, Section B, Header Y, Subset 12, any use of Imperial resources by a standing noble, landed or glory, shall be marked down and the Empire shall be reimbursed with a surcharge set by ITAD, as specific to her tier of nobility. As of recent actions, no surcharges have been paid. Wait, so a noble can send out an interior hit squad and all they have to do is pay a fine? Surcharge. Whatever, Milk scoffed. Where's the justice in that? Makes it easy to track who's abusing their position of power for significant personal gain, the investigator replied. And those that do tend to not pay for their abuses, trying to keep them hidden, which allows us to find them and nail them to the wall for actions unbecoming of a noble of the highest peerage. We cannot remove corruption, but we sure as the deep is dark can tax it. There was ice in her voice that put shivers down the pilot's spines. She was speaking from personal experience. So, what now, ma'am? Cookie asked after the silence hung for a bit. I don't think we've been much use in whatever, and you haven't asked us any questions, so I don't think this is a debrief. She shook her head. Don't worry. You're just here because I needed to give my commandos a bit of time to work. A green light flashed from the wrist-mounted PDA she wore, and that would be it. Come on, let's see if they broke any of the noble's teeth. We can only wish. So, cards? What is it with you and cards? Play dice like a respectable member of the Interior. Come on, lady. Cards are the way to go. Luck and skill, instead of just luck. There's skill in dice. Loaded dice, maybe. A pair of Interior goons, because what else could they be called, stood outside a door to the Intersystem Joint Tactical Command Center, or as the soldiers watching the place called it, the Radio Shack. It was a low-set, one-story building with a basement built not so much for any military purpose or to provide a hardpoint in case of invasion, but to house as many sensor arrays, signal repeaters, and radio antennas as possible, so the various groups working across the system all had someone listening to them, at all times. And since there was a high-ranking member of the Interior standing inside, two of her goons were standing outside. Specialist Carrel was marching back and forth, at his duty post on the gate. He watched the two larger women shoot the shit, as all bored soldiers do, and tried to ignore their ogling. One would imagine they'd stopped staring at his crotch and reek-swisting him after the first time he flagged them with his carbine, but no, the goons were the same goons he expected to find everywhere. He joined the patrol naval infantry to get away from women thinking of him only for his body, but apparently cunts like that are everywhere. He walked into the guard post and added another tally to the board there. His superior looked up at him as he did so. They try and get you to abandon your post again? Said they'd pay my leaving fee if I agreed to be their steward. I don't even think they have a ship, Carell responded to Sergeant Ferris. Ferris nodded. Well, if they keep trying, you're walking out of here with free drinks for a week. You're 2 hackles away from winning the pot. Specialist Carell had done this job before gunning this post. He actually quite liked this duty and requested to stay on it when reassignment came up. 48 steps from one side of the gate to the other side. Check your corners, check your cameras, wait 20 seconds, and repeat. 48 steps from one side of the gate to the other, repeat, repeat, repeat. Salute anyone with a red cape, shoot the shit with the sergeant on duty when you get a break. See how many times people try and proposition you in your hour-long shift. If they try 25 times, the platoon rookie buys his drinks for the week. Shame someone forgot to tell the rookie he had his kidney replaced with a cybernetic 4 years ago, due to an attempted stabbing. Carell stepped outside, looking to where the 2 guards were. Where the 2 guards used to be, he froze. Sergeant, he said quietly on their private channel, thanking S.H.I.E.L.D. for a full-face helmet to hide his mouth moving. The interior goons are missing. Shit, did they wander off? No, I was swaying my ass last time I walked by. They're flat out missing. There was a pause as his sergeant swore again before coughing. Right, ignore that. Orders from on high. How high? There is someone standing in my office with a finger over her lips, a big-ass pistol in her hands, and a mask of 3 eyes. Ah, that high. Carell sighed, shifted his kit, and began his walk-rounds again. It was going to be one of those nights, wasn't it? Ah well. 15 years of service and it still wasn't the strangest thing to happen on guard duty. Can someone please tell me why Privates Hex and Kesh haven't reported in? Meritorious Commandant Halvek all along called out to our command staff. I swear if they got distracted because that male up at the gate shook his ass at them, I'm going to have them up on charges after lashing their backs blue. Simmons watched her nominal superior rage and shouted at her cowed, yet not deterred command staff. The cameras showing where the 2 guards used to stand had gone to static for a second, and then the goons were missing. The fact there was a mature male marine at the gate implied a course of action that is covered quite well in the Unified Code of Imperial Military Law. Declaration of duty for purposes of procreation involved a pay cut, forfeiture of all pay for the current period, and possible confinement of 6 months to a labour division. Lucky for those goons they didn't desert their post, the drill matron thought, fighting down a smirk. As she noticed a camera near where a trio of off-duty goons were playing a card game flicker, she suddenly put her earplugs in. If what she thought was happening was what was happening, then it will get very loud, very fast. More cameras faded to static before returning to empty hallways and tables, instead of subtle loops or silent infiltration. It seemed to send when someone was making a point. She noticed Slivers looking incredibly worried, and Senwin calmly gestured for the synth cadet to move over towards her. The last cameras to flicker into static had been outside the sealed blast door, and they hadn't faded back in yet. Cadet Slivers? Senwin began, speaking in the low, quiet voice she was known for, but not projecting it around the room. This was a message for only one person. Yes, senior drill matron, the snake-like cadet replied, the tip of her long tail flicking back and forth in fear. I suggest you stare at the wall and cover your ears right about... The sealed door began to open, causing some of the more trigger-happy interior goons to open fire at the still mostly sealed reinforced metal door. Something small, cylindrical and missing a pin and spoon flew through the opening, followed by 2 other similar objects. Well, right about now, the drill matron said, slapping her hands over the Sliver's ear holes as she closed her eyes. In the Imperial military, there are sliding scales of gear quality. At the bottom are militia forces, under-equipped, over-specialized, and using gear that has been out of date for a few dozen years. Bought not because it's good fighting gear, but because it checks a box on some list somewhere, unless the noble in charge to supply them and pocket the extra credits. Then you have the forgotten stepsister groups, like colour regiments, embassy guards and the patrol, although patrol's choice in using an older uniform was more because no sailor, pilot or marine is willing to give up an overabundance of pockets for an extra layer of flexifiber between themselves and anti-shipping missiles. Also because the pilots enjoy standing out amongst the purple and brass uniforms with their green flight fatigues. Then you had the proper militaries. The folks with dedicated factories and supply lines with QC personnel swinging by every year or so to check up and make sure everyone's weapons function up to spec, and they don't need any random piece of kit for their groups. The fact Hellstrom always happens to put out some new gribble while those QC checkers come around was lost on nobody. Why are infantry companies required to carry orbital detonators at all times, even in locations not conducive to orbital fire? Blame Hellstrom. Quality you dream about. And then there are special forces whose every piece of kit is made by a single workshop, each part manufactured to the tightest specifications, each piece asked for by the soldiers or their command. Weapons crafted with the best technologies by Imperium-owned forges, armor woven by hand with the finest batches of fiber, and most importantly, grenades and explosives custom-filled for whatever need might arise. A single commando-grade flashbang is easily enough to take care of anyone in a room. 2 is just overkill. 3 commando-grade flashbangs went off at once in the confined equi space of the command center, and a split second later the door opened up all the way, letting a trio of commandos sweep in and begin taking people down. Metallic, modulated voices that sounded like unoiled machinery screaming out commands ordered anyone whose ears hadn't been ruptured to show their hands, to kneel on the ground, and to do it right fucking now. Samwin carefully pushed Slivers down to a good approximation of kneeling as she brought both their hands up. This wasn't the time to be cocky. Who needs to be handcuffed, stunned, or let go is always dealt with after the breach. Speed, surprise, violence of action. In a breach there is no room for hesitation, no room for slowing down, no room for mercy. Speed, surprise, violence of action. Only 2 types of armor matter. Armor that helps make a hit not hurt, and armor that helps keep you from getting hit. A coating of adaptive camouflage on top of the thickest infantry armor this side of the EOD forces is a damn good compromise between the 2 schools of thought. Combine that with the finest E-War suites that can be made sure portable, passive strength and enhancements, and combat webbing patterns considered more classified than the faces of the women who wear them. This armor is some of the finest in the universe. Speed, surprise, violence of action. They move without pause, without being seen. Guards would wonder where their bodies went, and they would feel a sharp, precise blow to the back of the head, and then wake up tied to a hospital bed. They would panic, trying to call for help on jammed comms before a stun blast puts them down. They would flee only to take a corner at dead sprint, and eat an augmented fist. There were 18 combat-ready militia-trained soldiers and guards for the 6 interior officers inside the command center. 1 pod to defend each officer during transit and to provide trusted soldiers at their back during disputes. Within 4 minutes, there were only 6 combat-capable soldiers, and the only reason they could be counted as such was because the flashbangs the commanders threw into the command center hadn't gone off yet. But the timers had run their course, the electronic fuse had sent its message, and a trio of explosions rocked the command center, a second before a trio of hardened Death's Head commandos entered the room. 6 soldiers stood by, weapons up, with blinking stars from their eyes. The cheap flash protection in their helmets did almost nothing to stop the grenades going off. They blinked against the endless ringing and endless night. One decided to be productively confused and instinctively clamped down on her rifle's trigger, spraying the group with automatic and unaimed fire. More damage was done to the walls and the commandos, but Gibble rushed in, letting her scattergun drop, and wrenched the rifle from the terrified soldier's hands before knocking her out with a single pistol blast to the chest. Aleph and Bet each had their targets picked out well in advance, and it was almost easier than shooting at the range. 5 shots, 5 hits, 5 soldiers down. The rest was cleanup. Senior Investigator Hrablada walked into the command center with her head held high. She looked every inch like the conquering warrior queens of ancient Shill in her stab vest and half of office clothing. The very important nobility of the Empress's glorious Legion of the Interior sat before her, handcuffed to chairs. She smiled and took a seat across from them. "Now," she began, "I would like to discuss the matter of taxes with you." They blanched. She smiled again. It wasn't a nice smile.